Today we're going to talk about water holes. We're going to talk about the power of having the water holes, when you should put them in, what they are actually there for, timing, what time of the year that they're powerful, and we're going to use a video sequence here that I've got just recently on a card pole that I really felt that this was a good representation of believing and understanding why these water holes can be so important. So you can see here, guys, is I've just recently collected this on one of our hit list Meyer cameras, and it's of course it's on video, and it's a really good, like I said, a really good representation of why we use these water hole locations. So what we're going to touch on first before we play the videos here is we're going to touch on when to put them in. So the water holes are, to me, it takes, I wouldn't tell anybody to not put them in at any given time of the year, but one thing that I stress is if you can get them in the spring of the year, that's the best, because what I've found last year especially, I had one that it's kind of worked both ways. I had them in the past where I actually put them in August and I had no problems with it at all. Now I put one in last year, and it took about 2 to 3 months, because I really was watching. I had the cameras going, and that was actually, I put that one in June, but it's not really a apples to apples comparison, if you will, at that time, because it's not, we're going to touch on here in a minute, it's not that the draw factor isn't there like you think. That when we think of water, we think of dehydration and hot, humid. That's what we relate to as humans, and that's not what the deer relate to it as. So it took a little while to get that one, comfortable, and get the deer comfortable using it. So I would recommend putting them in the spring. But like I said, I have, the latest I've ever put one in was in September. And I don't know if I just got lucky or if it was just a spot, but obviously I used the 100-gallon Rubbermaid tanks. So they're kind of, they are oblong, if you will. They're oval shaped on the top, and the reason that I do that, there's a couple reasons to that. So one, I wouldn't frown on telling anybody to not put one in at a certain given time of the year, but the spring of the year is the best, so you got time for the deer to get used to it. That's the first thing. Second thing is the tank, what tank to use. I use the Rubbermaid tanks. They're deeper than they are wide, and the reason that is it's 100 gallons. You can use 150. Just, excuse me, keep in mind that the bigger the tank is, the more water obviously you got to haul to it to fill it, because it's not like building a pond kind of style or a liner water hole where you just let it fill up over time. I am a big believer in these water tanks on a health standpoint versus the liner ponds that we were just talking. And the reason is that midge, like we've always talked about, in the Midwest especially, is experiencing a lot of that with EHD. That midge, that bug that's alive in there, is what causes the EHD, and they live in mud. That's what keeps them alive, is that damp mud. And so I'm a big believer in these tanks, because it cannot possibly happen in a tank situation buried in the ground. I think the states like the state of Illinois are missing the boat on that. I think they're aiding to the issue of water holes, using the aid of water tanks. I think it'd be one of the steps to help them get over the hurdle of EHD. And I've experienced EHD, blue tongue, and TB in all those states, but especially the EHD and the blue tongue. And folks, it'll rattle you to the core as a hunter. So to me, that's kind of an overstep look. But the size of the tank, 100-gallon, 150-gallon, it's an oblong tank on the top, and then they taper down. And the reason that it's kind of a good deal too is they taper down is they're easier to bury. You don't have such a big hole, but it takes about a 3-foot hole, and you got to place it in a couple of times. And I always want to put the lid, like this one here, you'll see it's right at ground level. And the reason I couldn't go any further is I hit a rock in this area, pretty good sized rock, and I couldn't possibly get it out. So it's above the ground a little bit further than what I usually recommend. I usually put them down just below the ground, so they're black, obviously, in that fiberglass tank. Now they make the rubber ones that True Green or whatever I think made them. These are Rubbermaid, but they're kind of more flexible. And I guess I've never had anything go wrong with them. I just feel that these Rubbermaid heavy duty tanks are what I prefer to use and what I recommend to my clients. So you'll see that they're oblong shape and 100 gallons. So that's the size. Now the placement of the water tank, where does that come in? What I'm going to show you here is, for whatever reason, over the last 2 years, 3 years of really using these strong, and I always was, like, well, you always hear, make sure you put the tank in the right spot, because they will use one side or the other. Now, I've had guys tell me that they'll use the side of the tank because it's not a pinch point. And what I'm going to show you here is, for the last 2 years in a row where I've really been studying, really putting some notes and collecting. That's why my cameras, outside of the cell cameras, my normal SD card cameras are all on video, is because that tells a story that I'm going to show you right here that you wouldn't get from just pictures. So I recommend anytime you can flip those cameras to video, please do so, because you can learn things just like this. What you can see, guys, is these deer are this doe enters in the, I'll play it here along and then I can chat about it as we go. So she enters in the water tank from the side, and you can see how kind of skittish she is. And this is one of the residence does. She approaches this way, and I don't know, I mean, there's a couple of mature does, I don't know exactly which one it is, but she comes up, she's using the licking branch. So there's a a good note there. We've obviously always got these licking branches where I can. I don't put as many. I mean obviously all of my stands don't have water holes, but like on this piece here, we've got one and then a natural pond. So you can see, just replaying this again, guys, you can see she comes up to it. She's nice and cautious. Now this is 7:56 in the morning, and you can see she's just on her way back to bed off the ag field, stops in. And it's, the time, you can see the time here just ticking away as she's standing there. So that ties into one of the things we're going to touch on here. So that's the first video. And then, this stretches over a time period of about 5 minutes. And in a deer's world and on the camera here, 5 minutes is a long time. So there she is again, kind of researching the tank. And I haven't had many of them all summer long really touch the tank, and now we've got action back on the tank, and it's only it's the end of September, first week going into the first week of October here. And so again, she recycles, keeps coming back to the licking branch, and again the time's ticking away here, and she's at the goes back to the water hole. She's on the side of the tank, and I'm going to show you here what I mean by just the angle of how that they, I've been noticing that they're using these oblong tanks, is they're using the end of the tank right here. This is oblong, like I said, kind of oval shaped, and the majority of the deer, so you see I've got my critter stick stuck in here, and she, as we're chatting here, keep resetting these, she's using the end of the tank, as they always cycle back around, they always reset themselves. And she's obviously scent checking this entire area. Now I haven't been past my cameras, my camera location down in here, obviously between my scrape and my stand. I haven't been over that line of travel now in a couple of months, and so she's not picking up my boot tracks. It's just one of those cautious enter the it's just like a natural water hole. She's just being cautious entering that hole. But as you'll see, she just keeps turning around this tank, and keeps coming back, hitting the licking branch, and then she goes back, and obviously you can tell she wants a drink of water pretty bad. But here she is again, entering in that side of the tank. So with that said, is how does that play into the positioning of these tanks as far as getting a shot at these deer? And so now, as I said, the clock's still ticking away here, and she's around and around and around this water tank, trying to settle in, eating some browse there, getting getting comfortable with the tank, checking out her surroundings. In the meantime, guys, if this is a doe, one topic here, if this was a doe that you wanted to harvest, I mean, look at all these shot opportunities here. Just she's around and around and around. Another thing is, I've watched her dispense pellets here, twice now in this video. And in a couple of that I had before when she came in earlier. And you know, so there's the deer dander all over this area. There's the pellet count. She's been in the scrape. Her feet have been in the scrape. She's been using the licking branch. So as far as being able to you know, harvest this deer in general off the water tank, huge success. The other thing you're going to see here is, here she is at the end. You can see off the corner of the slips on the tank there, but you can see at the end of that tank now I'm going to stop, or it'll stop here. So my stand is right over, you know, in here, 27 yards right this side. Like this is a view of actually where the camera is looking at. Here is where my stand is at, and it's 25 or 26 yards to the tank. And I mean, how much more of a, you know, an shot opportunity do you want there? That is the one topic. Now you can see she's using the end of the end part of the tank. So what I do is, you can see that this tank is actually completely broadside lengthways to me. So the longer portion of the tank is parallel with me. And you know, that's out in front of the stand here. Obviously I've got left to right travel here. I'm actually looking south at this location, so the deer are transitioning from the east off ag back into the bedding over here to the west. And so that's, you know, a shot opportunity on that doe if you wanted to harvest a doe. The next thing we're going to chat about is now her fawn actually joins her here, or another fawn. And so now we've got two. Now we've got two in there on the same tank, and this continues on. Like I said, now we're 4 minutes into it. This continues on for another couple of minutes. The last point that I'd like to touch on here is, with that in mind, is you can see how long that doe herself has cycled around that tank. And in this situation, early season is the more that the season goes on, the more you're going to see that taking place. Now, so that beats the hurdle of a few things. One, I really feel that they use the end of the tanks more, so position those tanks broadside to you, so when they enter the tank, they're obviously drinking from the ends. I'm going to say, as we could go back here and look at some footage, but I'm going to say probably 9 out of the 10 videos that I'll show you when you know, bucks or does use that tank, is that water hole is they're drinking from the sides. And even in this situation, if they do use the front of it like that, they're going to give you a quarter and away shot. So anywhere that they position at some points, that they will give you the shot opportunity. But I like to position them that side. And like I said, the smaller that the surface area is, guys, the reason that I use those deep tanks is, the larger the surface area, the more that evaporates. So you want to get a one, and that's, I think they're probably, I don't know, what are they, 3.5 foot across the top, and they're, you know, 2 foot wide kind of deal. But they hold 100 gallons, so they're deep. So you can see here, and they're like horses, you know, they'll bend that bottom ankle down. They'll stick their head all the way down in that tank if it gets low. But this one here is obviously full. I make sure they're full before the end of September, and then I never touch them again. With the rain and everything, I've got them overflowing. So I never touch them again the rest of the fall. And so that brings us to the next topic about a couple of things here. The next thing is so shot placement on the doe. If you wanted to harvest that doe, I mean, how many more shot opportunities do you want? And the biggest thing to me is that clock's ticking the entire time. That's one, or then her fawn comes in there, or a fawn comes in there with her, and at the end of it there. But that's one of, you know, I think there's what, 10 on this card pull that I had, and a couple immature bucks and a bunch of does on this card pull. But that timeline just keeps ticking away. Now, let's place ourselves in a hunting situation. You're in the stand while that's going on the last week of October, when they really start using these tanks, because when you really are going to see that this increase is when your best hunting times. If you pull a card and these deer are on that tank, what I show from my camera, from my card pulls in my inventory here, if you will, of these scrapes and water holes, is that shows you that the weather took a drastic change, and would have been one of the good evenings or good mornings to be in the stand. These are morning footage here. So the end of October, when the deer are really using it. Why are they really using it? And that's a true sign that you're pre-rut and things are starting to happen. The bucks are cruising. Now, you might not get as many does on the water tank, as what I find is my does will continuously, from like the middle of September right on through November. My does are pretty continuous on them, but the bucks are more on there more often the end of October, about that week of Halloween, the week before Halloween. And the reason is they're cruising, they're starting to look, they're on their feet, and their summer coat has come in, and now they're building heat internal. It's not so much of the exterior heat that we're looking at, the temperature wise, that makes them drink. Like, you think as a human, like I said before, taking a drink of water, it's hot, you're out in the yard, you're sweating, you want to drink of water. That's, to them, it's an internal heat that they're building because of that the extra layer of clothing that they've added on, if you will, for the fall. And then they're cruising, they're looking, and it's a powerful piece of the puzzle. Like I said, if I had one, I would have it in conjunction with a licking branch. For the last topic that we're going to talk about is this. That clock is ticking. We got 5 minutes of just one doe that morning, 5 minutes. Now, if that's the end of October and you got a cruising buck, and you can focus the attention of a mature doe or any deer in general, and all that deer dander, all them pellets, all that stuff, and you can have a physical live decoy in front of your stand for 5 minutes, and they're not alarmed, they're not running each other around on bait, they're not bumping each other off, they're focused there, they're focused on that, they're not focused on you, and that clock's ticking, and now you're 5 minutes into it. And if there's any buck if there's any buck that's trying to scent check that's downwind, that's trying to get a nose full of that scrape when he's cruising and going by, and then he gets a visual of those does on that water tank and on that scrape, that's the power of having that water tank, and then promoting that daylight movement. I mean, you can throw your decoys out the window. If you have a live decoy, there's nothing better than that live decoy standing there for 5 minutes. And like I said, that's just one of the like I said, 10 videos. And then what's happens is usually the majority of the time, what I've experienced in the stand is when the bucks come in to if they lay an eye on there, they get to the end of October and they get a whiff of that and they're downwind, or if they're following the does out to feed or whatever the case is, those does hang up there, and they will, instead of like, let's use a baiting situation or a situation just on a trail or a transition area where there's not a scrape or there's not a water hole. How many times have you been in the stand? I know I've been there a lot, when the doe comes through and she's on that trail, and you know that buck's going to come in on that trail behind her, and the next thing you know, he either goes out 20 yards and around you because he feels that pressure on that stand. Maybe there's some scent that he picks up or whatever the case is, or he goes behind you. And I'm here to tell you, since I've implemented, if I'm over a water hole, I've never had that happen. Every time that one of those bucks enter, yes, he might walk behind it a yard or two, and not physically come right to that scrape, but the majority of the time he's got his nose stuck on that scrape and or on that licking branch, and or taking a drink the end of October and then all the way through November as well. And he stops and takes a drink, and like I said, that's just shot opportunity after shot opportunity. It calms them down, and that live decoy effect, if you will, all that dander. And that's why I do not cut. The last thing that we'll chat about here, guys, is that's why the power is I do not cut that line of travel on these. I pull that camera, and that is the stand, the camera, and the scrape, like we always talk, in that order. If you're at the scrape, it's the scrape, the camera, and the tree stand. So getting out of the stand or going to check the at the end of your hunt, get down out of the stand in the morning, you walk to that camera, you pull the card from the backside, and you never cut that line of travel. And that's the reason. If they're going to spend that much time at those licking branches and water holes, you do not want your scent around that, because if it's one time passed, there's a pretty good chance that you'll get away with it if there's any boot tracks there. Now, if it's around the tank, and just that one situation that we just talked about right there, it's 5 minutes of one and then two deer, you're going to get busted. You're going to get picked up, especially with a mature doe. I can guarantee you, if I would have walked to that tank the day before, a few days before, the day before, that morning, or whatever the case was, if I would have walked out to that tank or that licking branch, she wouldn't have been there for 5 minutes. It'd have been a done deal. So that's the power of leaving them undetected, or not leaving scent around them, so you can stay undetected, and keeping clean around those cameras if you have to when you're pulling them cards, if it's not a cell cam. And that's the power of having those tanks. But if you do your part, these water holes and these licking branches will do theirs.